I can't help but commence my contribution on this debate, President, by noting that the Greens voted for the preventative detention powers in the Legislative Assembly. So all the lecturing and all the hectoring and all the conspiracy theories from Dr. Ratman, let the record show her colleagues in the Legislative Assembly with the Labor Party voted for the preventative detention powers that she now all of a sudden says are terrible. The Greens voted for that, consistent with their totalitarian approach to we know best, we'll tell you best, from their moral high ground. So let's not have the lecturing from Dr. Ratman and the Greens about conspiracy theories when her party voted for the preventative detention powers that have only been removed because of the public outcry. And President, let me start by saying, at times, I'm sure like all of us, the feedback and the cynicism from the community can be draining. But hasn't it been reassuring and fantastic to see the outpouring from everyday Victorians, not a right-wing conspiracy as Dr. Ratman likes to assert, everyday Victorians who don't care much for politics but understand when things have gone too far. And everyday Victorians who believe in our democracy, they believe in our institutions, they may be cynical from time to time, and President, I think that's probably a healthy thing, as has been demonstrated in recent weeks and months. They understood there was something wrong. They may not have read the legislation or got into the details of it exactly, but they just smelled a rat. They smelt there was something wrong. That they've been doing the heavy lifting for this government. They've been doing the heavy lifting in trying to stop the spread of the virus. And in return, the government wanted more power, without any explanation as to why. Threshold question for any new law, why is it needed? That simple proposition still hasn't been answered. Yes, there are many things in this bill that are rolled over from the first bill and that we support, as many members of the opposition have said. But this new power grab, when the COVID numbers have come down and been stabilised, why? Why is it needed? Now, I think Mr Rich Phillips and other members have reflected on the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's not my want to reflect on public servants because they do a very difficult job and they do a good job. But her performance at the Code Inquiry was embarrassing. And the Parliament is being asked to invest with her, to hand over to her, to say, handball, here you go, Madam Secretary. Here's a whole lot of power. You can choose which authorised officers you wish within that very broad class that Ms Crozier went through, with more power than the police. And we're asked to trust her when she didn't have the foggiest about the hotel quarantine inquiry. Not the foggiest, or so she said. It was an embarrassing performance that reflected terribly on her hard-working colleagues in the public service that are doing their best. And this Parliament's been asked to invest to give her a whole lot more power. No thanks. No thanks, Mr President. No thanks. I think she should be called back to the hotel quarantine inquiry and her answers should be further examined, as should so many other people. But that's a whole nother question. President, when I talk to Victorians, and people are contacting me I haven't spoken to for 20 years, that I know I'm in politics, don't know much else really. Sometimes they don't really even know what party I'm in, but they know I'm in politics. They're reaching out to me saying, what the hell is going on? What is Daniel Andrews doing? I used to think he was a good bloke. I voted for him. I've heard that so many times from people I know. I wasn't going to tell you, but I voted for him. What is he doing? What planet does he live on? Why are we in this lockdown that is destroying my business, that is destroying my life, that has put pressure on my marriage, that has said my children are depressed. They're falling behind in school and they can't keep up. They no longer get out of bed. All they do is watch a screen all day. These are the comments I'm getting all day, every day. And the self-righteous on the crossbench might say, oh, we can't talk about those issues. That's inappropriate. Well, it is appropriate. We're elected to represent our constituents and tell this parliament what has gone wrong and why. So we should say these things, because these things are important. Because I think those on, and I count myself to be lucky in this, I say that absolutely lucky to be in this position. Those of us with a regular income, a guaranteed job, have no idea how hard it is out there in the real world. And you know what the disconnect is, President? The people making these decisions don't live in the real world of small business being told, at some future time, when I feel like it, you might be able to open up again. And it might be the October the 19th, but it might not be. Oh, tomorrow it might be again. And day after, might not be. But the business I run needs 2 weeks to reopen because I've got to order stock from suppliers that might come from interstate. I've got a roster of staff that have gone off, doing other things because they've lost hope. You can't make a decision on tomorrow and expect to be implemented the next day. And unfortunately, the 2 or 3 people that are running Victoria at the moment simply don't understand that. And we could address our issues to the ministers at the table, but as others say, they're irrelevant to the operation of the government of Victoria. In fact, I think the COVID-8 is irrelevant to the vast majority of decisions made by the government of Victoria. I mean, isn't it extraordinary that on the 3rd of April, the Premier wrote to the Department of Health and Human Services Secretary and said, you answer to me now. And he did that to the other secretaries as well. Don't worry about the usual niceties of reporting through to the minister and then to me. That's a waste of time. At a time when cabinet government should come to the fore, when the institutions that make our democracy strong should count, they've been bypassed, absolutely bypassed. So Jenny Mikakos as Health Minister, you're irrelevant. Martin Foley might now attend the press conferences. He's irrelevant too. And we have a situation where governments have always been very careful to get unfiltered advice from the public service and then to get the political advice from their ministerial advisors. And that's important because the public service may put forward propositions that frankly are just politically unpalatable and they may need to be nuanced. And anyone involved in politics understands that. But when you have the two merge together, you get the sort of disastrous decision-making that leads us to be the only state in the second lockdown. And yes, it might be inconvenient at times to take advice from various different departments and then take advice from your ministerial staff and deal with external stakeholders. But you know what happens when you do that? You don't make the sort of decisions that have led to us being in this chamber today, wearing masks in a lockdown that is protracted and it would appear almost never-ending. And that's just not me saying that. Jenny Mikakos said that. When Jenny Mikakos was free of the shackles of responding to Daniel Andrews, not doing things for him necessarily because she was bypassed, but to answering, being constrained by being a member of Daniel Andrews' cabinet, that's what she said. That's what she said. When you have the sort of decision-making centralised, as Andrews did after the COVID crisis started, you lead to these sort of disastrous outcomes. Now, President, I could talk for a long time, but I've only got 6 more minutes. So I just want to now address briefly the scrutiny of acts and regulations process. And I congratulate Mrs MacArthur and Mr Burgess in the other place for the guts and the time in putting together a minority report. Because other members of this chamber from the crossbench said, oh, everything's fine now. The Law Institute say everything's fine and the Bar Council, look, they're not so concerned now the preventative detention powers have been removed. Oh, but hang on. You look at the minority report put in by Mrs MacArthur and Mr Burgess and it has a submission from some of the most eminent QCs in Victoria that is not on the SARC website, that would not see the public light of day unless this minority report had been written. Maybe everything isn't great Maybe the Law Institute and the Bar Council have had their significant reservations addressed, but maybe there's other significant issues yet unresolved, as this submission from some of the most eminent QCs in Victoria says. Now, President, I don't need to tell you, QCs are by nature very intelligent. They run their own practice. Getting a group such as Matthew Harvey SC, Paul Hayes SC, Gavin Silbert QC, Chris Blandon QC, David Chavan QC, the Honourable Dr Chris Jessup QC, Michael Grinnell QC, Amy McGee QC, Peter Chadwick QC, Pat Tean QC, Jack Rush QC, Ross Gillies QC. To sign up to the one document in itself is a very impressive effort. And the fact that this chamber has been denied the opportunity to see this submission, which actually talks about the risk of, particularly in paragraphs 19 and 20, the risks of appointing authorised officers without requisite training, so completely relevant still in the light of the proposed amendments, is a mistake. And that any power exercised by authorised officers would be best placed with Victoria Police members. I agree with them. And frankly, with all their learned capacity and skill, that's common sense. Because the naturopath, with the greatest respect to the naturopath, or the parking inspector from Tasmania, don't have the training in these issues. They have lots of great training, I'm sure. They don't have the training in these issues that we want when these powers are being exercised. And so to the crossbench members say, oh, it's all fine now. Have a read of the minority report. Have a read of the minority report. And I thank all those people who made submissions that no one will ever read, no one will ever see. And the chair of that committee, Mr Gepp, should be embarrassed and ashamed that he shut down debate on this very important issue. And I feel sorry for the SARC Secretariat that do a great job. They should not have been put in this position. And the Labor members on that committee should be ashamed of themselves. Ashamed of themselves. Now, President, it's interesting. There's been so much said about various issues. And I, again, could talk for much longer than my allocated 15 minutes. I just want to make two further points, President, that I don't think have been covered in detail. It's interesting, even we're having this discussion, the state of emergency has been extended. And but for those three crossbench members of the here who voted for the state of emergency extension, chances are the state of emergency, in my humble view, would not have met the previous threshold for that extension. The watering down of that threshold to meet the state of emergency extension was critical. And it's so regrettable, given this grab for power by the government that has been stopped at the last gate in the process, this chamber, preventative detention powers would have been approved by this parliament. And I think that vindicates the view of the opposition and most of the crossbench that the state of emergency should only have been allowed with much closer scrutiny from the parliament and much more regular accountability and renewal by the parliament. The parliament has proven its worth, and the parliament should have been relied upon more through this process rather than being shut down as Daniel Andrews has wanted to do, consistent with his centralisation of power, his I know best attitude, and everyone else can, go heave. President, from those small business people, those people I haven't spoken to for 20 years who've contacted me, from the neighbours I see when I'm out down to the local shops, to other people I know in my life who contact me at the electorate office and whatnot, the two words I could sum up, President, of what they're looking for from this government are certainty and hope. They want certainty and hope. They want the certainty that they can, put the stock order in to open their restaurant in 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, 2 weeks' time, whatever it is. The certainty. And they want the hope that there's something on the horizon that makes all this pain and suffering and all the issues that have taken place since the second lockdown caused by the hotel quarantine disaster, They want the hope there's something better. And you know what, President? The tragic thing is, as a Member of Parliament talking to constituents, I can give neither. I hope members of the government reflect on that, the words certainty and hope, because Victorians deserve that.